talking with Dr. Jason West this morning. Our conversation brought to you by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. And we've spoken with you before during this pandemic on I think, a couple of times on different topics. But this is an interesting one today. And thanks for spending some time telling us about it. You know, say Grandma and Grandpa, they have their COVID vaccine, and I and the rest of my family, we have ours. Is it time that we can finally get together, take off the mask, and make things bright and new, just like it was the old days?
Well, you're asking the question that literally everyone is asking me. We come in, we have a patient encounter. I say, well, you know, what brings you in, or what's the chief concern? And then as we're trying to wrap things up, what other questions you have? And then they say, well, I want to go visit, you know, my family. I want to go, you know, reconnect in these relationships that have been altered the last year. And it's really affected everybody. It's affected the kids. It's affected the grandkids. It's affected the parents. And I was visiting with my compounding pharmacist just last week, and he said, Dr. West, our mental health prescriptions, you know, for anxiety and depression and everything have gone up 1,000%.
Yeah.
Since last January. Not doubled, not tripled, 10 times what we were doing, because people are not in their normal social relationships, and it's really affecting them.
Yeah. And so that question is the natural follow-up then. When can I? And what happens if we go on in this mode where we really can't have human contact with others as normally we would? In some areas of the country, they're doing it. In some areas, they're being very restrictive about it. What are the ramifications?
Well, and here's what I'm telling people is it's not a universal policy that we can adopt, and here's what I mean by that. I just had a patient that was, and this happened just last week. They're in their 70s. They're actually pretty healthy. They got, you know, some health care hiccup in October, and what I mean by that is they felt a little bit off. It wasn't anything they had to go into the hospital for. Sure enough, they ended up, you know, with coronavirus. They recovered nicely from that, and they're like, oh, hey, we're really worried about, you know, transmitting or being a carrier, and so they have restricted their contacts with their grandkids and their kids and everyone else. And in our visit, he said, I'm absolutely miserable. Yeah. I'm so unhappy. Grandpa was like, I'm unhappy. And I said, well, think about this. You've had the disease. Now you've beat it. You have the antibodies. The lower your age is, it seems like the lower the risk factor. I mean, this really isn't a disease that's happening to our kids. And then it seems, you know, there's really not a huge risk factor unless you have the risk factors for, you know, the other diseases, diabetes, congestive heart failure, cardiovascular disease, and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I said, do your kids have that? No, my kids don't have it. You've had it. And he said, I'm really not worried about transmitting it to our grandkids. I'm just trying to follow the guidelines. And he said, I'm telling you, Jason, this cure is worse than the disease. When can I go back and visit them? And I said, well, look, in your scenario, I think you can establish those normal relationships, but I think everybody's going to have to look at their condition in a separate individual manner, and then you got to make your individual decision.
The mental health burdens are, as you said, getting worse and worse, and the longer this goes on, the more it's going to be like that. In fact, you actually liken it to someone suffering from PTSD.
It's so it's such an important part of life to have those relationships, you know. And it's interesting because, you know, we saw that Discovery Channel movie about being alone, where they put these guys out in the wilderness. Mm-hmm. And then they see how long they can last. And my wife was teasing me about that because I hate being alone. I can never last on that on that show. And this is how, unfortunately, some of our elderly, you know, constituents, because constituents is wrong, elderly family members feel is, what have I done to deserve this isolation? And what we're trying to tell them is, we're trying to protect everybody in this process. Mm-hmm. And the crystal ball aspect of when can I go back to normal, think everybody's got to go back and just evaluate where they are and do the things that are really good for your health. Vitamin A, vitamin D, making sure you're getting enough sleep, enough water. All of those things, I think, are really, really critical. Washing your hands and wearing the mask, I think all of those are so important. But then also, when possible, I think we got to go back to normal life.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the meantime, if that is not possible, why the idea of getting in touch with and speaking with in some way, keeping that connection with family members is so important. What about those who have cognitive issues, who have dementia, those who are suffering the most from mental difficulties already, and now this is compounding it?
Well, it's really a tragedy. I mean, I spoke with a patient last week, and he's saying, hey, my mom has had some dementia that's going on, and he said it has accelerated like you would not believe over the last 6 months because we haven't been able to get in and see with her and visit with her like we used to. He said, I just saw my mom accelerate in age years in the past 6 months, and he said, I feel so horrible. I don't want to go see her and accidentally have her have this viral infection, and yet at the same time, I'm seeing a huge decline on a much faster rate than we've ever seen before.
Yeah, and obviously the situation, the longer it goes on, the worse it's going to get for us. A couple of moments ago, you mentioned some ways that we can ensure our health or give us a better chance at avoiding the virus. And I'd like, if you would, for you to go back and go over those a little bit more slowly. Certain vitamins and certain behaviors that we can do in order to help us to keep away from coronavirus.
So what I tell people is, look, the healthier life that your food is, the healthier life that you are. And so that's the number one thing. Your best source of vitamins is your knife and fork. But then also, vitamin A really helps to lubricate and protect the mucous membrane. Vitamin D3 is really good for your bone health, your immune system, your emotional and mental health. I mean, it would probably be easier to write a book about what vitamin D doesn't do than what it does do. And then good old vitamin C, my favorite vitamin. It helps to stimulate the immune system. Zinc is really helpful that you can get from your green leafy vegetables, kale, spinach, Swiss chard, your citrus fruits. I mean, if you're eating healthy, you get your body on a schedule, you try and get adequate rest, you get your relationships as healthy as possible, and again, that's easier said than done, but everybody, to the extent that you can, have a stress outlet. That's the way that not only does it help against the coronavirus, it helps against all infections.
Yeah, and especially at this time of the year, we're about to enter into, as long a way as it seems to be, it's not really that far away before we'll enter into the spring season, and it seems like that's more of a cold and flu season than the winter. Because we've been so protective of ourselves, and colds and flus are actually down this year because we're staying away from each other. But there's going to come a point in time where we're getting out more and we're around other people, and all of those germs will be out there for us. And so as this spring comes along, we really have to protect ourselves, do we not?
We absolutely do. And you remember that your immune system goes to war 24/7, all the time, fighting against bacteria and viruses and fungus and parasites and chemicals and toxins. And the extent that we can keep that part as healthy as possible, we win. And we win by making sure that our immune system literally kills the bad guys when they come in contact.
You told us last time we spoke with you about a website folks can visit to learn more about protecting yourself, eating the right things, and taking the right sorts of minerals. What is that website again?
It's westcliniconline.com.
westcliniconline.com. Dr. Jason West, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. Stay safe and stay healthy.
All right. Enjoy Pocatello today.
We will. Balmy 22. I'm going to go out and get a suntan.
There you go. It's the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 1160. 1 FM.